other things, obviously bigger ticket things, I mean, they're going to get cheaper as people are having to hawk their things, like their stereo equipment or, things like that, used cars. But a lot of stuff that just, that you make up and you use and it goes away, that stuff's going to get more expensive. And, even if the stuff goes up in price over the next year or two by 20 or 30%, that's a huge return on your investment. If you can buy something today at $1 instead of buying it next year at $1.20, that's a 20% return.
Okay. What currencies would you suggest right now?
Well, obviously the only currency right now that's going up is the yen. All the other ones are going down. But I mean, ultimately, I think that's going to change. And I think currencies in Europe like the Swiss franc or the Swedish krona are going to rise. I think the Singapore dollar has the potential to move up a lot. And ultimately, the currencies like the Chinese RMB, could really move up, or the Hong Kong dollar if they're depegged.
Okay. Hey, I got one more thing to ask you. Could you mention the Austrian School of Economics on CNBC sometime? And
well, I talk about Austrian economics when people talk about I know I've mentioned it, although most people that are watching probably won't know what it is. But yeah, I talk about it. All right, thanks for the call.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
The next caller is it James in California? I think so.
Yes. Hi, Peter.
Hey, how are you?
Okay. My question was, I've heard you talk on your show about how what you do may be illegal in 5 years or so.
Yes.
I was curious, if my wife and I do invest through Euro Pacific, is there going to be a warning? I mean, how would we know?
Well, it won't be illegal for you to have an account. What I'm saying would be illegal, or they would put restrictions on it, would be the ability to invest abroad. So right now, let's say somebody sends me $1 million. I can legally take that $1 million and buy stocks anywhere in the world. What might happen when they put in exchange controls is the government might say that an individual American can buy no more than $10,000 per year of foreign stocks. So if you sent me $1 million, I can only take 10,000 of it and invest in something in Europe or Asia. The rest would have to be invested in the U.S. Or they could do something like impose a tax on buying foreign currencies, and the tax could be 100 or 200%. So, right now, if you send me $1 million, I can turn around and buy you $1 million worth of foreign stocks. But if the government imposes a huge tax on foreign exchange to discourage Americans from investing abroad, somebody might send me $1 million, and I might only be able to buy $300,000 worth of foreign stocks. So it could be very expensive or completely illegal to do this, and it wouldn't be unique. I mean, a lot of countries, when they get into trouble and capital starts to leave the country, they try to stop that capital flight. And instead of trying to go after the reasons why people want to get their money out of the country and changing their behavior, instead they try to go after the symptoms, which is people trying to get out of the country, and they just try to stop them. And so, that's one of the reasons why it's important to do this now, because you might not be able to do it at all later.
Okay, one other question. What about the government confiscating our gold? Like, will there be any warning of that? Or
I doubt it. I mean, I think if they're going to confiscate it, they're not going to tell you they're thinking about confiscating it because they don't want you to hide it. But that's one of the reasons that we, recommend and sell Perth Mint gold stored over in Australia, because it's not in the country, and I think the government is less likely to get it from you if it's not even in the country. I mean, how can they force you to bring your gold back from Australia and give it to them? But if it's in this country, they can probably take it, especially if you have it in a safety deposit box, because what's probably going to happen if the government makes it illegal to own gold, there's going to be a government official at every bank, and every time any American goes to a safety deposit box, there's going to be a government agent with you to make sure there's no gold in there. And if there is any, they're going to confiscate the gold and put you in jail.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter. I really appreciate all your good work.
Thanks. Thanks a lot for calling.
Okay, bye-bye.
The next caller is John in California.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, John. How are you?
Great. First of all, I'd like to say I did see that video that you were referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And just the arrogance of those guys, the talking so-called experts, is just unbelievable.
And, of course, there's a lot more like that. I remember a couple of times on CNBC, people asked me if I was a communist. When when I was talking about problems in our economy. There's some beauty ones. And it's it's a little unfair to some of those guys on Fox because they're not the only ones that did that. And to be fair to Ben Stein actually apologized to me, not to me personally, but in a column he wrote in the New York Times. So he comes off a little bad, but he actually was gracious enough to admit that he should have listened to me, that I was right and he was wrong.
Yeah,
anyway, I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's actually the one that caught me off guard because he's usually, a much more kind of conservative about everything. So they apologize. But so I'm in a position right now where I'm in cash, and I'm seriously considering moving all that into Euro Pacific. But there's a couple things that I'm trying to figure out that I'm hoping you can help me out on. Mm-hmm. And so basically to get out of the dollar and get into international stocks or currencies. So I've looked at a couple different things. I've looked at the RIDEX funds and iShares and MERCX and things like that. Mm-hmm. Trying to really understand the difference when I invest in something like that versus with Europac, what the differences really are. And then also,
well, I mean, look, you can buy some of those things like Merck through Euro Pacific, but the main difference with what we're doing, and we can buy you any of those other, securities. The main thing that we're doing for people is we're trying to buy them individual stocks, and so they can rate their own portfolio, their own mutual funds. So you eliminate the management fee aspect of it, and we can kind of pick the stocks that we think are not particularly exposed to what's going on in the U.S. Now, as it turns out, many of the stocks that we bought that we didn't think were exposed to the U.S. are not, but their stock prices are still getting hammered because the price of everything is going down. I mean, there's no investment that we could have made for anybody that would have appreciated in the last few months. I mean, everything has gone down. The only thing that would have worked was dollars or yen or short positions, shorting stocks. Of course, that would have worked. We could have shorted anything. We could have shorted all the things that we bought, right? And that would have made money if we covered now. But that wasn't my game plan. And of course, with hindsight, of course, if you knew exactly what was going to happen, that's what you would do. But when you try to make your best guesses based on the information you have at the time. And it's hard to anticipate. The U.S. economy is going to collapse. I mean, that was something we knew would happen for sure. The rest of it, you're trying to figure out, well, how do you protect your wealth? Where do you keep it? Because we know this disaster is going to happen. And right now, the people who just stayed in cash did the best. But, very few people would have done that. Most people that were bullish stayed in stocks if they didn't think there was going to be a major collapse. And a lot of people who thought there was going to be a major collapse, a lot of them bought gold and bought gold stocks, and, they're down 80%. We struck a balance by buying a lot of foreign stocks, and we're down a lot too. We're not down as much as some people. But there's not that many people that said, especially a few years ago, that watched the markets going up, that watched gold going up, watched oil going up, and decided to keep all their money in the bank earning very little rates of interest. But as it turned out, for the last few years, that was the place to have been, with the benefit of hindsight. But I'm sure a few years from now, when people look back, they'll discover that wasn't the place to be, not if you stayed there.
Well, one thing that I realize with like the RIDEX funds, for example, that they take money and they put the money into a bank account in whatever country they're investing in that currency. And I'm just thinking, well, if the whole financial thing is still in a state of collapse, is my money safe? Whether it's
there's always counterparty risk, and you got to look at the counterparties. I mean, if you want to have just currency and you have a decent amount of money, I like to buy government bonds of these countries because there really is no counterparty risk there. You own a government obligation of Germany or Switzerland or or Japan or Australia.
Now, and then one last question. So now I also have Fidelity in my 401k or my 401k in Fidelity, and they have an international stock fund. If I were to buy that mutual fund, am I really buying international stocks?
Sure, you are, but you have to figure out what stocks they own and how aggressive they are in the portfolio, how often do they turn it over, what are your management fees, They could have a lot of stocks in there that are major exporters to the United States. They could have a lot of stocks in there that owe a lot of U.S. debt, so you don't know. I mean, my whole idea, since I'm so bearish on the U.S., most foreign funds aren't foreign funds because they're negative on America. I mean, most people on Wall Street think everything is great in America. They just want to have some foreign funds. I am going to foreign markets for a reason.